What, let's see, Nora, Tom, and Emma said about introduction of new technologies and in the workspace, and for instance, some new actions. You mentioned something like pick and move, or how's that? Yeah?
Yeah, so the idea would be that you'd be able to you'd have your piece of paper and you'd be able to pick up things from here and place it into different spaces around.
Yes. So the question that emerged in my mind, I'm researching new interactions and how people cope when they are introduced to new forms of interaction. That means new interfaces, so visually, graphical user interfaces, and new forms of input. So we have gestures, we have touch. So I'd like to hear from you and perhaps from Nora as well. What was the reaction of participants when they came across the technology that you presented? For instance, yours at the British Library.
Yeah.
You mentioned that young people were more embarrassed, perhaps, with the installation, with the technology itself.
The youngest people,
Yeah.
and I mean, because this was in a public space, and that's like, 5-year-olds headed straight to the Surface table, so they were quite familiar with it and not afraid of it. But yeah, the touch screens and the touch screen, we had one touch screen on a pod, and nobody touched it. Everybody went to the mouse, and so we thought about taking away the mouse, but then we thought nobody would use it at all. But yeah, so the touch screen wasn't very popular either.
Can you imagine what?
We thought it was because the touch screen was up like this, and it wasn't very comfortable to access the information touching like this. You're used to, if you're using your stuff like this. So we thought it was because the display was
others
like
were observing.
Yeah. And then the Surface table, yeah, I think people really liked it. It just depended if you were familiar with that kind of expanding. I don't know if that answers your question. But
Yes, so for instance, at yours, there was any visual cue that informs that you could, for instance, pick and move?
Well, no, I didn't mention that in the study, the first sort of idea was, the first task was to give them a document and to give them, the task was to pick up things from the page, also select things from the page and place them into the two locations. So to the right would be to query it, and to the left would be to clipboard it, to have a look at the post-it notes on the computer later. So that was to get an idea of how they would do it with paper, and then that was they all took to it quite easily and quite natural to be able to use their finger to either select, like highlight or pick up things, and they identify different ways of picking up different text. So paragraphs were very different to single words or things like that. And then, so I think then it moved to the touch screen. So the idea was that we just represent the document on here to get an idea of what people were picking up. And they wanted more feedback on what they were picking up. So they wanted to have some visual sort of cue maybe, or something like that. So at the moment it doesn't do anything. It just literally takes 2 points of contact and picks it up and places it. And you get feedback once you've placed it on here, like just a vibration to say that you've placed it.
But before starting, they knew because you told them it was possible. That action was there.
The action was, the action at the beginning, it was, the interaction would be initially the first task was to select items from a page, just if you had it in your hand with no pen, no nothing, no objects, and how they would do that, and then it was to use it with the tablet. So it was understanding how they might do it naturally, then how they might do it with the system and how it's been implemented. Yeah.
All right. I'd like to sit down.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I was wondering if you had any thought thoughts about how you might use brain to expand spires?
Well, when we talked about that example earlier, isn't it, how we'd missed Alison off and suddenly found somebody who'd be so relevant. Actually, now there's an example of, I dare not even say that that's serendipity, because I have to say, I didn't think of that. When Daniel said it, it would be a very obvious thing to do. One thing I'll say is that the information, and this was one of the things, we obviously were able to use information from within the university, and part of the exercise as well was how you can process information to make it into knowledge in ways which can be used, because this is one of the problems we found, that many institutions don't understand the value of information that they've got. I'll give you one example, but test this out in your institution. You do a whole list of different use cases which people can use. Our university does not know, it does not have a list of its PhD students and the thesis, the title of the thesis they're doing it. Now, my guarantee is that most of you, even though we don't realise it, the same situation will be there. The reason is that it's of no interest to the university, that's what we're told. Faculties need to know that because that's who it's in their hands. But of course, we want to do stuff about finding these connections. Now, again, this is one of the problems, I think, with information, particularly something like SPIRES. It's hidden in a whole number of different forms. So one of the ways we've been developing is particularly to be able to obviously mine information in a whole number of different things. I mentioned that what we've been doing with companies. A lot of that is actually mining stuff which is on the internet in different ways. So certainly, I'd say that'd be a really nice challenge actually to look at that. But I will make that point as well, that what we weren't trying to do, we had a lot of discussions about this, because I'm very keen, this is what I did in sort of my postgrad research, is on artificial intelligence and so on, but this is not about artificial intelligence, this is about collective intelligence. It's about the collective intelligence, for instance, which is in this room, and which could be potentially expanded. How do you make that happen? That's the main task of it. Not to create something fancy that can, think what we're thinking. That's pointless to me. It's about how do we create those connections and then facilitate that. And I think, really, SPIRES, this is one of I think this is actually my favourite research network in a way, just because it's just so diverse. But that's also a challenge. But it's great that something like brain, really, I suppose, can be used in something like that. So yeah, bear that in mind.
I wanted to pick up on how brain creates these connections. So not from a technological sense, but what kinds of things does it know about the different people in order to make those connections?
Yeah. Well, in this case, we had different amounts of information, as I said. So for instance, about companies, in the main, we only had information that was published, although we were working with some networks where we could get more information about them. With researchers, we had more information, because we had things that they put as their interests, things which were listed in different things, like, for instance, we had an expertise list, which was actually used by our public relations department, which was different from that. We obviously had a list of their publications, and in some cases, not in many cases, we get some abstracts out of that, projects they'd worked on. So that was the information, raw information we used. The problem, as you said, we found is the big, and I'm sure you'll know this and anyone else who tries this, is that that's too much information in some ways. So if you're trying to find these relevancies, you really have to start thinking cleverly. And the other thing, of course, is also use the